Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my early thoughts and transfer plans around Game Week 12 and we'll look ahead to future game weeks as well. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, before we look ahead to Game Week 12, my current team, my watch list, and my transfer plans, let's briefly review Game Week 11. It was a few days ago now, but I'd love to know how many points you scored in Game Week 11, and what is your current rank as well. And let me know if you're happy with that. Maybe let me know what your rank target is too. I don't think rank is, well, it's not important until Game Week 38. Your rank right at the end of the season, that's when rank becomes important. But I still feel like it's too early to be particularly bothered what your rank is. Obviously, if you're having an absolutely stinking start and your rank's like 7 or 8 million, then yes, that's not ideal. And you might have to temper your expectations in terms of what you can achieve. But even if you're sat there at like 3, 4, 5 million, you can still get top 100k, top 50k. I saw someone this week went from 2.9 million to 600k in 1 week. The ranks are still so tightly bunched together. Obviously, the further into the season we get, they start to spread out a little bit. And this is maybe the first point in the season where you want to look at your rank and say, right, if it's really not very good, then I need to start making better decisions and maybe adapting the way I play slightly, unless you've been like super unlucky. But I'm still not overly bothered at this point. Like there have been so many times around Game Week 10 or 11, I've been ranked in the millions and I've gone on to finish in the top 50k. It's happened twice at this point of the season where I've been ranked not particularly well. So firstly, I need to starting better in FPL, but also it's just not particularly important, right? It's, like I said, they're so tightly bunched together. That being said, in Game Week 11, I managed another green arrow, so 66 points, and I've gone from 1.35 million. For the first time since Game Week 1, believe it or not, I'm back into the top 1 million. So currently looking at 981k rank. So not the start that I would have wanted, but now back into the top 1 million. The next target is top 500k. If you remember back in, was it Game Week 6 or 7, I was ranked at 3.8 million. And I said, right, the first target is top 3, then top 2, then top 1. I'm just setting myself incremental targets. And like I said, the next target is top 500k. I think I'm about 10 to 15 points off that. And then I'll just keep plugging away until I get back to where I want to be. So yeah, a really good week. And I would say pretty much everything went as perfectly as it could have, bar I got captaincy wrong. And obviously that hurts at the moment. And captaincy has always been important in FPL. If you watched my preseason content, I made a video where I said the single most important decision every week is captaincy. Because you're not only getting an extra player with captaincy, but you're getting an extra version of what should be your best player. So it's so important, captaincy. We can't underestimate how important it is. But this season, because some of the premiums have been scoring so big, we saw Palmer's 25-pointer, Salah gets a 14-pointer this week, and because in those weeks some of the other premiums have been blanking, there have just been such big swings with captaincy. So that's the only thing that I didn't get perfect this week. But let's start with the goalkeeper. Fabianski is a bloody legend. Look at him with that 9-pointer. It was an 8-pointer, but then he picked up in the final moments before they updated the game. He picked up that final bonus point, which gave him a 9-pointer. I just love him. What a man. I mean, I put him in at 4 million on my wildcard, not expecting him to actually do anything for me. But then when I realised he was starting a couple of weeks ago, I brought in Sanchez because Sanchez has great fixtures from 12 and beyond. And I knew that I could play Fabianski in those 2 weeks. So Fabianski has not only got me a 9-pointer, but he allowed me to bring in a goalkeeper that I actually wanted from 12 and beyond. So I'm really, really happy with him. Couldn't have gone much better for me. In the defence, 8 Nuri, 6-pointer. I wasn't ever expecting a clean sheet for 8 Nuri. We own him for the attacking threat, but it's nice that he actually went out there and got a clean sheet. I actually think Wolves were a little bit disappointed in that game. After they scored that first goal, after that, Southampton were relatively dominant. We just know with Southampton, their issue is converting possession and dominance of the ball into actual goal-scoring opportunities, and they didn't have that many. And so 8 Nuri clean sheet was very, very nice. Gabriel, Arsenal, concede once again. I am glad for the last couple of weeks that I did sell Raya because it allowed me to get Salah into the team. But I think going from 12 and beyond, double Arsenal defence will be strong. They are still a good defence. The fixtures are improving. If you look at Arsenal's team against Chelsea, that was their strongest lineup. Maybe Timber versus Calafiori. Other than that, that is Arsenal's best 11. So as long as Saka isn't actually injured, which we'll discuss a bit later, they should be in a position now, if the fixture's coming up, that they should be able to go on a really nice run. So I'm happy to have Gabriel But I do think if you've got double Arsenal defence, you probably still hold on. Rico Lewis was probably the most disappointing player in my team. I did not expect Rico Lewis to start, but given that my alternative was Vandenberg, I thought, you know what? I'll just start him. If he comes off the bench, maybe he gets an attack in return. When I saw him starting, I was like, I've made a great decision here. And then it was 1-0, obviously going into the back end of the second half. And I was like, this was a brilliant decision. But he got the yellow card and conceded twice late on. So Rico Lewis is a huge issue for me now. I still think the minutes are a doubt. I think the only reason Rico Lewis started that game is because Ake and Akanji weren't available to start. So they had to play Simpson Pusi and they had to play Gvardiol as sort of centre-backs with Walker at right-back. It was a bit of a mess. So I think that's the only reason. I think Rico Lewis, with Walker back now, is just too much of a doubt moving forward. The midfield was actually a little bit disappointing as well. Listen, I started Rodgers against Liverpool. I wasn't expecting anything, and in fact, he didn't deliver anything. I thought there was a chance because you never know, but I knew full well that it was not a good week to be playing Rodgers. But in the long term, I wanted to keep him, and I just didn't have the funds or the transfers to move him on. Mbeumo, he's playing very well, but he's playing very wide. And when Brentford play against weaker teams, and I'm not saying weak teams, but weaker teams, they don't play a 5 at the back, they play a 4 at the back. So when that happens, Mbeumo is playing very, very wide on the right wing. He's playing almost like we saw of points of like Salah under Klopp towards the end, where he like hugs the right-hand touchline. He's not even drifting in that often. The thing is, with the slightly more difficult games, maybe against like Aston Villa and Newcastle, Brentford will switch to a 3-5-2, and probably Mbeumo will play up top alongside Wissa. The only thing that might chuck a spanner in the works there is that Thiago, their very, very expensive signing, should be back soon as well. So, I don't know, Mbeumo's still fantastic, but he's now up at 7.9 million. I feel like if you don't own Mbeumo already, the next two fixtures against Everton and Leicester are good, but you could look to go without. Anyway, in this game, he got a single assist. Wissa was the one, once again, that was getting the big chances, and that is the only slight concern with Mbeumo, that we want him to get the big chances himself. Cole Palmer blanked. Another big game where he did relatively little from an FPL perspective. I thought he had an okay game from a footballing perspective, but basically Arsenal just cut out the balls into him, so he wasn't able to get on the ball as often as you would have wanted. I was surprised they didn't switch him out to the right. I thought that might have been a potential option to just get him on the ball a little bit more, because in those central areas, he was just struggling a little bit. But yeah, 2 points. We own him now from 12 and beyond. So again, as long as he is actually fit and available, now's the run that we want him for. Salah, I'm glad I brought him in. I brought him in last week and captained him. I didn't captain him this week, but I'm so glad that I own him, because it limited the damage. I lost something like 36,000 places from Salah's 14-pointer, because basically loads of people captained him. But the fact that I owned him just meant that there wasn't the same level of damage, obviously, as if you didn't own him. And then with the front line, they all returned. So Raul Jimenez getting a 5-pointer was great. He at least returned. I would have wanted more, like Wissa getting the 13-pointer. That's what I'm hoping for from Raul. And he's starting to go into a slightly trickier fixture run after game week 12. So he's probably on borrowed time right now in my team. And I can't imagine myself keeping him that much longer. But this week he does have Wolves at home. So yeah, 5-pointer from Raul. At least he got something. HAALAND 5-pointer. Now what to say about this? I wasn't trying to be different for the sake of it. I wasn't trying to be clever captaining HAALAND. I looked at the two fixtures and the two teams and the two matchups, and I thought HAALAND has an equally good chance as Salah of returning. And if I had to predict who I thought would get 2 returns in their games, I thought HAALAND had a greater chance. I liked the transition-based game that Man City would play against Brighton. And in all honesty, the first half panned out exactly how I predicted. I thought HAALAND would get lots of chances, and I thought Brighton would struggle with the way that City play. It was perfect. I watched that first half. HAALAND had 3 big chances. He converted one of them. And it was just all perfect. And I was like, what a genius choice to captain HAALAND this week. It was exactly what I wanted from the game. And then after that, City fell apart. The second half didn't go the way I wanted. Because he missed a couple of big chances and because he got booked, he then dropped to 5 points. I count myself pretty unlucky on this one, because I think, like I said, if I predicted it exactly how it would go. And in the Aston Villa game for Salah, he was gifted that goal. Like, when I say gifted, I mean he was gifted that goal. And to that point, he had a couple of moments, but he was largely very quiet. And Salah does this, right? Salah is quiet until the final moments, and then he just turns it on and finds a way to score. I do think that the swing of, 9 points is quite unfortunate there, but it is what it is. You can't get every decision right, and I'm still fairly happy with the choice that I made. And then the big man, Cunha. What a legend. And if you own Cunha, let me know down below in the comments. But it's so much better for me because I brought him in game week 7. And in that time, he's got 9, 9, 6, 12. Did he get anything else as well? So he's had like 5 returns in 5 games or something like that for me. It's been a brilliant transfer, and he's already up to like 6.8 million, I think. I've said I've not made too many brilliant decisions this season, but going for Aït-Nouri and Cunha on the Game Week 7 wildcard, when lots of people looked at it and said, why are you bringing in Wolves assets? It was to look ahead. And I knew that all we needed was a couple of returns for Aït-Nouri and Cunha, and everyone would be looking to jump on them. So there we go. That was the team in Game Week 11, 66 points. Let's now forget Game Week 11 altogether and move ahead to Game Week 12 and look at some of the players that I might be looking to bring into my team. So guys, let's now look ahead to Game Week 12, and this is how the team is currently set up with 0.2 million in the bank and 2 free transfers. The team is currently rated at 98% according to Fantasy Football Hub, and if you still want to get that 7-day free trial and 30% off, there is a link down below in the description. I think especially if you're on Wildcard, looking at the data, being able to plan ahead and all that good stuff is very useful. So yeah, use that link down below. It supports me, but it's still, like I always say, I can't imagine playing fantasy football now without Fantasy Football Hub. So, Sanchez in goal. He obviously now comes in for this very, very nice fixture run. And in all honesty, as much as I love Fabianski and it's nice to have the backup, the only week that I can foresee myself playing Fabianski now is probably in Game Week 15, I think it is, when Sanchez has Spurs, Fabianski has Wolves at home. And it's Spurs away for Sanchez. So unless Spurs are really struggling at that point, and based off Game Week 11, it wasn't very good, I could foresee myself playing him that week. But otherwise, that's it now. Sanchez is back in. Lots of people are concerned about Sanchez's minutes. And I spoke to FPL Harry on FPL Therapy, which is my new in-studio podcast. And he basically said that Sanchez is slightly at risk, more at risk than your usual goalkeeper that you would bring in, but he still doesn't foresee Sanchez being dropped. And I'm kind of the same opinion. If you look at Maresca's comments a couple of weeks ago, he was saying that Sanchez is absolutely the number one, that Jorgensen isn't quite ready to be the number one. So that could happen in the future, and it might be that I regret making this move. But the thing is, Jorgensen has made a couple of mistakes in the Europa Conference League, and he's got obviously a couple of clean sheets in there too, but it's a much lower level, and even him himself has not been playing particularly well. So yes, there have been a couple of mistakes from Sanchez, giving away penalties, being beat at the near post, and Chelsea fans do not like Sanchez. Like, if you speak to any Chelsea fan, they hate him. But for me, I don't really care if they hate him, as long as Maresca thinks he is still the number one. So hopefully I at least get Leicester, Villa, Southampton. But I even think longer term than that, unless Jorgensen starts to look really good or Sanchez repeatedly makes mistakes, I think he should be okay. The great thing is, as long as Areola doesn't come back in for West Ham, if Sanchez is dropped at any point, it's actually not a bad fixture run coming up for West Ham. So I could foresee myself, if Sanchez even is dropped, maybe not being forced into making a move immediately and hopefully being able to play Fabianski. So yeah, I'm not saying this is the perfect setup. In hindsight, I maybe wish I would have gone for Verbruggen a couple of weeks ago, because now Brighton gone a really nice fixture run. Verbruggen's cheaper, and he's been playing very well, making lots of saves. I do think on a wildcard right now, Verbruggen or Sanchez would still be my favourite too, but I'd probably lean towards Verbruggen. So the keeper situation is absolutely okay. The defensive situation is absolutely where I have the most issues in my team. So Aït-Nouri is great, but he is on 4 yellows. So anytime soon, Aït-Nouri could be suspended. But for now, he's okay. This isn't a great fixture this week. He clashes with Raul Jimenez. I don't expect a clean sheet, but I'm still very happy to have him. Gabriel, delighted. Like I said, Arsenal going into a really nice fixture run now. This week against Forest at home. I know Chris Wood's been good, but Forest haven't been that good overall defense from an attacking perspective. So Gabriel really happy with. I would even potentially look at bringing in, again in the future, maybe another Arsenal defender. It probably wouldn't be Raya, because I just don't think he makes the saves on a consistent basis. But I just think Arsenal defence will come good. So very happy that I've held on to him, and I will be starting him this week. The other 3 defenders, there are issues with them altogether. So let's start with Leif Davis, because believe it or not, I have less of an issue with him. I mean, you might not be able to see because the font's very small, but look at it. He's got, after Man United, 4 green fixtures in a row. I'm not necessarily suggesting that I think they are all green or that I would want to play him in all of them. But as cover for Aït-Nouri, who's on 4 yellows, and just as another player that has some attacking threat, most defenders don't keep clean sheets. And you can say that Ipswich are terrible, but most teams are terrible. Most teams aren't keeping those clean sheets. So I don't know that I desperately need or want to use a transfer at the moment. Like, if I had 5 free transfers, I'd consider it. But using one of my valuable free transfers, taking out Leif Davis, it just doesn't feel as necessary for me at the moment. So that leaves both Vandenberg and Lewis, who I could foresee being issues in the near future. I'll start with Vandenberg because he is very cheap. I think he's up to 4.1 now, actually, but I bought him at 4 million. Most weeks I would hope that once I do get a better third defender, he would just be sat second or third sub. But I do think going into the busy Christmas period, I do almost need my defender to either have decent fixtures or just be playing every week or just be a little bit better than Vandenberg. I've spoken to a couple of Brentford fans that I trust. They seem to be of the opinion that that Vandenberg should start against Everton and then might start against Leicester. And the reason for that is Rico Henry still isn't back available and fit. And Aya, or Ajer, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's currently out injured and probably out for game week 12. And for that reason, Vandenberg almost has to start again at right back, or potentially he could play at left back as well. So we should get a start from Vandenberg against Everton. Not that Brentford are particularly good defensively, and not that he has much attacking threat, but it just covers me for 1 week if I need it. If you're wondering why I'm worried, he's not a right back or a left back, he's a centre back, but he's very difficult to displace the likes of Pinnock and Collins. And with Henry back, they could play Aya or Ajer at right back. They've got Rorslev as well. So they've got lots of options in that defence, and he's not nailed on at that point. They're also going into a pretty tricky fixture run as well over the December period. So I just look at him and I could just foresee him causing me issues in the long term. But again, hopefully I don't really need him as often. So the plan is maybe to play him this week if I decide I don't want to make a defender transfer. But then in the long term, just tuck him on the bench and then just hope that I either accumulate enough transfers to deal with him, or he nails down a starting spot, or I just don't ever end up needing him off my bench. So that's the current situation that I've got right now. Less of an issue for me than probably Rico Lewis. And the reason that Rico Lewis is the bigger issue is he is the one that is meant to be my third defender, right? He's 4.8 million. He's the one that I need to rely on. And the reason that I'm even having to think about starting Vandenberg is because I don't really like Rico Lewis as an option. Could Rico Lewis start against Spurs? He absolutely could. It's not going to be at right back because Kyle Walker will be put there to deal with Heung-min Son, right? So we saw that against Brighton. We predicted it from a mile off. He's not going to put Rico Lewis there against Matoma. And why would he then put Rico Lewis there against Heung-min Son? So Kyle Walker, unless he's unavailable, will start as the right back against Spurs. Gvardiol has to start as the left back for me because he's much better there than the centre back. And Gvardiol has just been so good. So the only way that Gvardiol wouldn't start at left back is if they don't have two fit centre backs. You would imagine that Ake, Akanji, maybe even Diaz or Stones, they could be available for game week 12. As long as they've got two fully fit centre backs, I think the back four will be Walker, two centre backs, Gvardiol, which means that the only way Rico Lewis starts that game is if he starts in an out-and-out midfield role, which has happened on a couple of occasions, and I don't think it's gone particularly well for Lewis or for Man City. So I guess what my prediction is right now is that Rico Lewis doesn't start the Spurs game. After that, he then plays Liverpool. And then in the following games, he's got the likes of Forest, Crystal Palace, Man United. They're not awful fixtures, but we're going into, again, that December period where that's now 2 games in a row. I don't think he would have started unless, obviously the reason he started, I think, is because Ake and Akanji are unavailable, so Gvardiol had to go into centre-back. But it's not that I don't think he's first choice, but I think in games where there is a slightly quicker winger and that he doesn't trust Rico Lewis as much defensively, Walker's going to start, and then all of a sudden, it just pulls into question whether Rico Lewis can start in another role. So I think he's the biggest issue in my team right now. Whether I transfer him out this week or next week, I'm unsure, but I would be very surprised if Rico Lewis isn't leaving my team across 12 or 13. In the midfield, I'm actually very happy with the 4 that you can see starting this week. So Rodgers, Mbeumo, Palmer, Salah. I just don't see any need to take any of them out at the moment. On Rodgers, the issue that I've got with Rodgers isn't him. He's fantastic, and he's got some really nice fixtures coming up. Crystal Palace, Chelsea's not great, but then Brentford, Southampton, Forest. It's a nice run of fixtures. My issue is that I have to start him every week because I've got Dibbling on the bench. And I've been saying this for a while now. I just really need to find a way to free up some funds to get Dibbling up. The issue is there just aren't really many good cheap midfielders. You could take a punt on Ahmad or Buonanotte, but really what I want to do is get Dibbling up to someone like Semenyo. But then I'm having to free up like almost 2 million to get that done. Or, sorry, over 1 million to get that done. Which, in my team, when I've got the structure I have, freeing up that much money isn't as easy as it sounds. So I almost have to change the structure of my team or just accept that every week I'm basically having to start Rodgers, which, as we saw last week, doesn't always pan out. But Rodgers is fine. Mbeumo, after the Leicester game, I could foresee myself selling. I do have a lot of money tied up in him. But I just think going into that trickier fixture run, there could be some other players like Matoma or even like a Semenyo to free up some funds if I want to keep my premiums. I'm not tied to Mbeumo forever, but with Everton and Leicester in the next 2, he's going to be staying. And like I said, in those trickier fixtures, the thing is that unless they have a sudden formation change, if they play this 3-5-2, and Burmo's going to be playing up top alongside Wissa, which is where he is, in my opinion, much more effective from an FPL perspective. So, yeah, Rodgers and then Burmo fine with, and then Palmer and Salah, arguably the two best captaincy options this week. I'd love to know down below in the comments, where are you leaning with captaincy? But Southampton and Leicester, it doesn't get much better than that, really, for our FPL teams. So they are both playing away, but very happy to have the pair of them in place and not have to worry about that. At the moment, the armband is on Salah. Apparently, I think Ramsdale's broken his finger. Salah's going to get a complete rest over the international break. This is one of those where I'm like, I probably won't overthink this one. Because I do think that Palmer and Haaland, by the way, are great captaincy options. But I just think this one is slightly more clear-cut for me at the moment in favour of Mohamed Salah. So he's got the armband right now. And like I said, dibbling on the bench is an issue, but I need to free up funds if I want to replace him. Which leaves the front three. I'm actually not overly happy with the front three, believe it or not, at the moment, because there are other forwards that I would love to own. I'll start with Raul Jimenez. This is actually a really nice fixture for him against Wolves at home. My only slight concern, and it's maybe not a massive concern, maybe I'm overthinking it, he is once again on international duty with Mexico. They play at 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and then Fulham play Saturday at 3 p.m. against Wolves. So there is a bit of a tight turnaround between his final game with Mexico and then the game with Fulham. However, in the last two international breaks, he has played for Mexico in that second game, and then he has come back for Fulham and played, I think, like 72 and 90 minutes. So he has, on two occasions now, done the quick turnaround and still started, and you would have to say that based on what we've seen, he is a massive upgrade on Maniz. My only slight concern, and people have been pointing to that he's done it before, he'll do it again, he's played a lot of games in a row right now, right? And fitness does catch up on you, and you do need a break eventually. So it is different to the previous two occasions. He's now started so many games consistently. I do wonder if this is a game, going into after that, Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal, Liverpool, could you see Maniz start this game? Yes. So I do have some slight doubts and question marks around these minutes for this, and that would be my only concern. And obviously going forward, the games that I've just mentioned, I will sell Raul Jimenez either this week or next week, I would imagine. Because I think there are some other really nice forwards to move to. There's no issue with him, but he's normally getting like 70 to 75 minutes now, and the fixtures are starting to run out. I knew it was a bit of a short-term punt going for him, and so it's just whether I sell him this week, if I have any doubts around him starting, or whether I end up doing that next week. Cunha's okay. In fact, sorry, Cunha's fantastic. For this week, I'm not overly convinced because Fulham have been very good defensively. It's away from home. And I was not particularly impressed with Wolves against Southampton, other than in that first minute they had that massive chance which Sarabia took. But Cunha's great. I worry about Wolves in a game like this. I could imagine Fulham winning this like 2-0 and just completely dominating the game. Hopefully, given the players that I have, it's more like 3-3. But that would be my only concern with Cunha this week. It's probably not the best entry point. Like, if you don't have Cunha right now, Fulham and Bournemouth as back-to-back games, they're not great. Then he goes into Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, which is a much better fixture run. But yeah, listen, I've got him in my team. I bought him at 6.5 million. Very happy having him. And then Erling Haaland. People ask me, what are you going to do with Erling Haaland? I don't know, as things stand. If I look at my team for this week with 2 free transfers, there is a lot I could do if I sell Haaland with those 2 frees, right? I could sell Haaland and Dibbling, as we'll see in a second, for like Saka and Isak. And you'll look at that and go, Ross, just get the moves done. Give up on Erling Haaland. And I understand it. Like, believe me, I do. But does that massively upgrade my team for this week? Saka's playing against a very good Forest defence, and Isak is brilliant, by the way. But is Isak that much better against West Ham than Haaland is against Spurs? Maybe, but I don't think so. And then if I make those moves, I end up then having to bench Rodgers against Crystal Palace. And again, the players that I'm bringing in, they're probably better than Rodgers, but it's also not a bad week to play Rodgers. So I don't know that this week is the week to sell Erling Haaland. I look at next week, he plays against Liverpool away, with the best defence in the league this season, and it's away from home. Then going into Forest at home, and by the way, it's still not a bad fixture for Haaland, but another good defence. I just wonder, this probably doesn't feel like the exit point for Haaland for me. Especially, and I think it's very different for me than it is for you. If you don't own Salah, I already own Salah. I feel like if you don't own Mohamed Salah, now is a very good switching point because Salah's got Southampton this week. And even next week, I'd rather Salah against Man City at home than Haaland against Liverpool away. If I'm captaining one of the players that week, which I'm not, by the way, but it would definitely be Salah over Haaland. So yeah, if you don't own Salah, it's a nice pivot point. But for me, because I already own Salah, It's just to get in the likes of Saka and Isak, which is a massive upgrade for my team overall, but I could always go and do that next week. So it's, yeah, I think with Erling Haaland, I could definitely foresee myself not having him in the next few weeks. But this week, I just don't know if this is the week to sell him. And I find it interesting that at the start of the season, I was like the anti-Haaland gang, and now I'm the only one that seems to be exercising any patience with him. The issue for me with Haaland, if he had like 0.3 XG in the last game and he wasn't having any shots and he just wasn't getting the chances for Man City, I would have sold him a couple of weeks ago. Because for me, that is a major issue. If Erling Haaland isn't getting the service because KDB hasn't been there and he's not getting the chances, I look at that and I say, huge, huge issue. You can't pay that much money for a player that isn't even getting the chance to shoot and to score goals. But Haaland is getting the chances on a ridiculous number. Like, he's comfortably got the highest XG in the league over the last 3 or 4 games by some distance. He's had almost double the amount of shots in the box as the nearest player to him. It's crazy how good his underlying data has been. And I know people say this is why XG is nonsense, Haaland's not in form. But what I have is now numerous seasons where Haaland is an exceptionally good finisher and takes his chances. We know that Haaland is good. So all we need is that slight switch to change now in Haaland and him to start finishing the chances. I at least like that he's getting them. I also like that Spurs haven't been very good. City, a lot of their players are getting a full rest over the international break, and they might have KDB back fit and available, who, I know I just said Haaland isn't having issues getting chances, but KDB back just creates more chances. I feel like Spurs is the perfect game for Haaland at the moment. Again, Ange will go all out. It'll be a very transition-based game. I think it will suit him. So yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I need to sit here for hours and justify having Haaland, but I guess I am doing so because so many people are looking to sell him and to move him on. But yeah, that's the team as things stand. 2 free transfers, 0.2 million in the bank. Let's now take a look at some of my transfer possibilities and the players that I'm looking at bringing in into my team. So guys, here are my current transfer possibilities for Game Week 12/13. The reason I say 12/13 is I could make all of these moves this week or next week, and I don't feel like it drastically changes my future plans or my overall team either, if that makes sense, because they could go this week, but then all of the moves also make a lot of sense for next week as well. So the first option is I do just roll the transfer and go into Game Week 13 with 3 frees. And then, like I said, option 2, 3, 4, or a combination of them could all then happen for Game Week 13 for free. In an ideal world, I think this is where I do go. As long as I think Jimenez starts and as long as I'm okay playing Van der Berg, which isn't really ideal, by the way, I just feel like it gives me more options for Game Week 13 to go there with 3 free transfers. So I think that is where I would like to go. I'd say it's most likely for me at the moment, but you just never know what might happen over the international break that might change my opinion on that. One injury, all of these options are in the bin to a player that I didn't think. Like, let's say that Salah he's not even on international duty, but let's say he gets injured in training or something, then of course the entire thing changes. So we have to wait and see. But yeah, ideal world, roll the transfer. Option 2 is I just sell Rico Lewis with 1 free transfer, get a better defender in than Van den Berg, and then roll the second free transfer. At the moment, my 3 favoured replacements are Van Hecke, Hall, and Colwill. Not necessarily just Van Hecke, but a Brighton defender. I have looked ahead to future weeks, and there's a lot of planning goes on behind the scenes that you might not see. The weeks where I need a player is 2, 17, 18, and then like 20 and 21 or something like that. In those weeks, Brighton have exceptionally good fixtures. So I look at it and I think a Brighton defender for the next couple with good fixtures, they cover 8 Nuri because of the great fixtures coming up if he gets suspended. They're not an awful defence. They're about 10th for expected goals conceded on a consistent basis. They just cover me really well, the Brighton defence, and they've got a few really good cheap options as well. We've got Van Hecke, who is the safest for minutes, but also has the least attacking threat. Kadioglu's been playing on the wing for Brighton, which I actually don't like because I think Minter and lots of other players, Solly March once he's back, they can all play on the wing instead. So I don't like that Kadioglu's been playing on the wing. As long as he, like, if the Brighton fans can tell me if Kadioglu, once the wingers are all back and they're playing, as long as he's nailed on at fullback, then I'll bring him in. But I just worry they've got like Veltman, Estepinian, Lamptey, Kadioglu. They've got players that can play left back and right back. Even Solly March to some extent could play left or right back himself. I just think maybe it's just safer going for one of the centre backs. Now, I originally had Duncan. I spoke to a couple of Brighton fans. They still think that Dunk is very likely to come back into the team, but apparently it's not dead cert. Because with Igor, they've got a left-footed centre-back, and Van Hecke is too good to drop. And they said that there just feels a slightly better balance at the moment with Igor and Van Hecke. I still think Dunk comes back in. He's 4.4 million. He's got much more attacking threat than Van Hecke. So I may make the move still, assuming that he is fully fit. But I'm also slightly spooked by what I read. So let's say that for now it's Van Hecke, but it could be any Brighton defender that I think will start. The other team that actually perfectly matched my fixtures when I need them the most is actually Chelsea. My only concern with a Chelsea defender is I have Sanchez already. Do I want to have a double up on the Chelsea defence in a lot of weeks? I actually think Chelsea are better defensively than people often say, but I still don't know if I want a double up on the Chelsea defence. So that's the only thing that puts me off now, someone like a Colwell or a Fofana. But again, in the weeks that I want them, they're actually better than Brighton. They're exceptionally good fixtures in the weeks that I need them. I'm just not sure I can fully back that. And also, it does block me then from someone like Nicholas Jackson, because I have Palmer, Sanchez, and Colwell. Or let's say Reece James does start getting really good minutes and starts to bomb on a little bit more. Or let's say Reece James gets injured and so does Cucurella. Maybe all of a sudden it's just like Gusto starts every single game. Well, I'd rather Gusto. So I'm not sure I also want to block that third Chelsea spot in my team too. Even Madueke and Neto, they could become good value. So I'm probably less likely to do Chelsea defence. And then the only other player that I'm really strongly considering is Lewis Hall. He's up to 4.4 now, which isn't ideal because I wanted him at 4.3. But again, really nice fixtures. This week, West Ham at home. He's got some creativity. He's third or fourth now for baseline bonus points for defenders. So there's a lot to like about Lewis Hall as well as a replacement for Rico Lewis. So yeah, if I'm to replace Rico Lewis at the moment, it probably is Brighton defender or Lewis Hall that I'm most tempted by. So that is one option. Option 3, again, this could happen in 12 or 13, is also to sell Raul Jimenez for a Brighton attacker. Would look much better in game week 13, because I think this week, assuming Raul Jimenez starts, Wolves at home is probably better than Bournemouth away. But then next week, Brighton have Southampton at home, which is a lovely fixture. They then have Leicester as well a couple of weeks after that. And Raul Jimenez has Spurs, then he goes into Brighton, Arsenal, Liverpool. By the way, I think that Spurs game, as I said with Haaland, could suit Raul Jimenez. But yeah, I just think Southampton at home for João Pedro or Welbeck looks great. I'd probably go João Pedro. And I know it's like his content creators' baby. Everyone loves him if they create content. But he does have everything you'd want. And the manager is speaking so highly. You've probably heard that quote going around that he is basically their one player that can make a difference in any game. They spoke about his leadership qualities as well, Hertzler, and how they've missed his leadership on the pitch. I do think João Pedro is Brighton's best attacker, and I do think João Pedro will start 90% of games for them. João Pedro will not start every game over the busy Christmas period. His injury record isn't good enough, and they have too many attackers to risk it. So he will be rotated, absolutely. So don't bring him in if you expect him to start every game. But I think he's such good value and such a good asset that I can take the benching when it happens. Welbeck, though, will continue to go under the radar in comparison to João Pedro as we saw at the start of the season, and Welbeck will continue scoring. I still think he's first choice. So I think at the moment, João Pedro 10, Welbeck as the 9 is definitely their first choice pairing. But you have Ruta, who can play as the 10 or the 9, and you have Ferguson, who is a very good number 9 too. So both of these players will not start every game for Brighton, but they are both very much first choice. I think I would go João Pedro for the saving. So yeah, I could see myself, in an ideal world, rolling the transfer this week, and then next week, selling Rico Lewis and Raul Jimenez for a Brighton defender and João Pedro, both against Southampton at home. That feels like a really nice set of transfers. But then we come back to the issue of Erling Haaland. And the reason that I am having to go for all of these cheap assets, and the reason I'm having to start Rodgers every week, is because of Erling Haaland, right? And if I make those moves, I am then still needing to start Rodgers against Chelsea next week. So I still have the same issues in my team. And then I've got Haaland against Liverpool. So one possibility instead is I say I keep Raul this week. I keep Lewis in my team. I play Vandenberg. And actually, I just deal with the issue of Erling Haaland and Dibbling. Because Haaland's too much money and Dibbling is causing me issues every week. So what I would do, as I said, is Haaland to Isak and Dibbling to Saka or Fernandes. I could also go for Nicholas Jackson. I just prefer Isak on every department. He's on penalties. I think his minutes will be better. I actually prefer the fixtures overall. I think he's a better finisher. The datas are normally very similar. Like, there are very few things that I like about Jackson, other than across the next 3 weeks, Jackson's got Leicester and Southampton. So definitely over the next 3, Jackson is the better asset. But he's also on 4 yellow cards. So I just think Isak is better for me. So if I can afford him, which I can quite comfortably, I'm going to go for Alexander Isak. This is just such an upgrade in my team. But like I said, this week I like Haaland. I also don't mind Rodgers. And I feel like Rico Lewis feels like a bigger issue for me. I also think João Pedro is great value. Like, I just look at some of the other moves and I'm just like, is it a huge issue holding on to Erling Haaland? The only reason Haaland becomes a huge issue is if holding on to him is really blocking me from doing other things that I want with my team, which will be the case very, very soon. So, yeah, I don't know how I feel at the moment. I'd love to know down below what you think of these combination of transfers. I have looked at something like rolling the transfer in game week 12, and then in game week 13 taking a hit, a -4 hit, to sell Lewis, Rao, Haaland, and Dibbling. So I'd have 3 free transfers. At that stage, I could bring in Isak, Saka, João Pedro, and then I would have quite a bit of money, actually, to upgrade Rico Lewis to a slightly better defender. So I could even do something like Haaland, Dibbling, Rao, Lewis to Isak, Saka, João Pedro, and an Arsenal defender or something like that, right? So I could really upgrade my team. I'm probably leaning more towards, for that reason, rolling the transfer, just because of the opportunities that it affords me next week to sell Haaland, Dibbling, Rao, Lewis. I can make several transfers and it only be a -4 hit. It does require, though, me to either start Lewis and hope he starts, or to start Vandenberg and, again, hope he starts. And even if Vandenberg does, they're so bad defensively, Brentford, that I'm not sure I expect much. So, yeah, it's a little bit of sacrifice this week, I suppose. But I just think this is a really strong team. Palmer, Salah, Haaland for this week feels great. In the long term, as you can see by my transfers, I don't think Haaland and Salah works very well with Palmer. I think you just have to sacrifice too much. So I think Salah, Palmer, Saka is probably the best trio. Then again, if Haaland goes and gets me 3, 4, 5 goals against Spurs, will I keep Haaland? I probably will, because I'm a massive knee-jerk and I could see that happening. The only other thing is just to see like other players that I'm slightly tempted by. So the only other defender that I didn't mention there is Kirkes, 4.4 million. Good fixtures coming up. If I don't want to go for Brighton defender, if I'm worried about Lewis Hall's minutes, Kirkes could be a decent shout. In midfield, as well as Saka, obviously Bruno, great fixtures over the next couple. It's just in the long term, I don't really like their fixtures, and I want to see how we line up under Amorim. So I don't think I would make the move this week. And then if I go next week, there's only one good fixture then before a pretty tricky run of 3. So I don't think I'm going to end up on Bruno. In terms of cheaper midfielders, it's Semenyo and Matoma, just based on those fixtures coming up. I really like the pair of those. And then in the attack, we spoke about Isak, Jackson, João Pedro. So yeah, I'll go back to my team. Let me know what your current transfer plans are at this early stage. Let me know what you think of my team. And make sure that you've enjoyed the international break. And we'll be back with more content very soon. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 12 transfer plans early thoughts video. Hopefully you did enjoy, and if you did, please do smash that like button. And if you are new around here, make sure you are subscribing as well for plenty more content. Also, make sure to check out our FPL Therapy episode this week, my new in-studio podcast. I released an episode with FPL Harry and FPL Focal, so just search for FPL Therapy on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. You can find that episode there, and hopefully you do enjoy. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.